Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Looking for Love in All the Wrong Dust Jackets, a show where three disgruntled harpies talk to you about everything we love in romance, whether that's books, movies, TV shows, whatever we like. My name's Liz.
I'm Danny.
And I'm Wiggles.
And welcome to the episode. Today, we're going to talk to you about the new movie Challengers. But before we get into that, I gotta warn you, we are crass and unhinged. We swear a whole hell of a lot. And we're gonna talk about the naughty times. So if you're not into that, I totally get it, but you've been warned.
You know, like, just if you don't want that, we're in season 2. Go away. Go away.
I mean, harsh, but true. Okay. What have you guys been up to? Get me caught up with what you've been reading and watching and doing.
Okay, well, I watched a lovely docuseries about the show MASH. So It's about how MASH kind of changed the face of television because it changed a lot of things. It was one of the first shows where when a character left, they didn't replace the character, like when an actor left, they didn't add a new actor in and this is now this person. That's not what happened in MASH. They killed F. Henry Blake and brought in Colonel Potter. And it was interesting to see a lot of the stuff about MASH. And MASH is one of my favorite shows ever because I am apparently 80 years old, but it's fine. And then I also read a book called Rock Hard Gargoyle by Maggie Mayhem.
Was he rock hard?
He was rock hard. Also, so much tail action.
Oh.
So much tail action.
Well, dang, you found it.
I did indeed. There is a scene where they are sitting there watching a movie with a bunch of other people in the room, and he basically fucks her with his tail while they are watching an action movie with a bunch of people in the room.
My God.
It's aggressive.
It was so good.
So, a Danny 5?
It was definitely like a 4.
Okay.
There's a whole series of them. The next one is Date with a Demon.
I do love some demons.
So the gargoyles, like, he lives with 2 of his brothers. He has 3 brothers because they always have a room in the corner because they're watching the buildings.
Okay.
And 2 of his brothers live there. His other brother has a mate and everything, and they live alone. And then their honorary brother is the demon. So I'm assuming that he is the next one up to bat, as it were. And I shall be finding out.
All right. I didn't do much this weekend except continue to binge Resident Alien, so that's all.
That's all I have to report.
I like what I like. What can I say?
I mean, I have how many times have I said I watched Grey's Anatomy?
Well, okay, so here's the thing. If you've never watched this show, like, all the time we're talking about how we want more stories about, like, really widely diverse cast, about people who over the age of 20, you know, and this show has that. Like, the cast is not exclusively, of course, but a handful of the main characters are women in their 30s.
Yeah.
Nice. It's a really, and it's also just good. It's very funny.
Aren't those characters either also indigenous or...
Some are indigenous.
Yeah.
There are characters of other races as well, but it's primarily indigenous or white. But that's a lot of small towns. So
yeah. It's also just very funny.
It's very funny. Yes.
Well, don't worry. I got you covered.
I expected nothing less.
So I read Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark, which is supposed to be this, like, I don't know if it's new adult or fully adult. I mean, it's got sex scenes in it, so it's not YA. Not that you can't have sex scenes in YA, but you can't have these ones. And it's like a mafia, age gap, arranged marriage. Those are the tropes book. The pacing was bad. It was just bad, straight up, to the point where I was kind of like, how is this popular? Because she would, like, build up scenes where, like, big action things would happen and it would kind of resolve in scene. And then we just cut to, like, a week later, and nobody talks about this thing that just happened. And I'm like, what? You can't just like do something and then not have it actually like mean anything. So I think I gave it a 2 or a 2.5. It was not for me, which is too bad. And then I read a book that was for me. It is Wild Pitch by Kat Giraldo, which is a romance about the first female pitcher in the majors. Mm-hmm. And it's got a diverse cast. It's got age gap. It's got diverse both in queer and race. And she falls for the older, like 30-some-year-old catcher who's dealing with being older in sports, and all that shit. And it's very good. I liked it a lot. I think I gave it a 4. It also has a little bit of BDSM where she's more dominant than he is. So it's kind of like you get a different spin on that. It did have some pacing issues though as well. Like, I don't know if authors need to be reminded that when you have scenes, they also have story arcs to them. And you need to finish the story arc of the scene because sometimes they just like skip from things. And I'm like, no. You created something so small as them like complaining about each other's music choices and then finally one giving in to listen to the other's music. And then you just cut to a new scene. Like it doesn't resolve.
Oh, yeah.
But it really didn't bother me all that much because I liked the rest of the book a lot.
Fair enough.
And since I'm making up for Wiggles, I can also say that I finally finished the Castlevania animated series. I've never played one of the video games because I didn't have the correct console for that growing up. But I did finish the animated series, which I love so much. And Alucard is voiced by Colonel What's-His-Butt from Austenland.
Colonel What's-His-Butt.
Yeah. Is it Edwards? Andrews?
Oh, yeah, Colonel Andrews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very different character, but...
Oh, he seems to exclusively go polar opposite from whatever he did last, because he also plays the villain in the movie One Night with the King. I don't know if you're familiar or not.
No.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, really, it's beautiful, like cinematography.
Oh, it's stunning.
Yes. But the transition of me seeing him in that movie to Austenland was like, oh my God, how dare you? You do not belong in this world. But then he made up for it pretty quickly. So I was like, all right, actually, I love you. Never leave, never change.
Yeah, One Night with the King is absolutely beautiful. It is a religious story because it is the story of Esther from the Bible. But it is, the cinematography in that movie is just stunning.
That design, gorgeous. Costumes, gorgeous. Looks, gorgeous.
I've never seen it.
The acting, very good too.
I'll have it. You can borrow it.
Doubtful.
I know.
Yeah, we've met you. I also have it.
I'm sure it's great. I don't know. I just don't like...
You just don't like fun. It's fine. We understand.
I just can't envision myself like sitting down to watch a big dramatic movie.
Oh, that's the best.
It's
Instead,
also a romantic movie.
It is.
Just leave me to my bloody, gory animated shows. That's fine. Because that's what Castlevania is. I was referencing the thing I was just talking about.
I just assumed that all that was going to need to be cut out. But I appreciate you bringing it back around.
Whatever.
Okay. So, I don't have a ton of fun facts for us today, being as this movie came out a hot second ago. But I can tell you a little bit. Luca Guadagnino has gone into the movie with the thought process of, let's not make a tennis film, which I have a lot of thoughts on, but in general didn't want to create the same movie where you just like have the camera set at the middle of the court and you just watch them volley back and forth, I think is what he meant by that. Also, there was like a lot of intention put behind recreating the love triangle, which I'm sure we will again talk about. The director actually had a little mini tennis court set up and would like move his figures around like it was like a toy set. Oh. That's not what the article says, but that's what I imagine. It just says that he has a mini court made. And, like if you're going to make things like that, you can't call it not a toy.
Well, here's the question. What size is mini? Because a tennis court is larger. Mini could be like one that fits in your backyard or one that fits like on your lap.
I think he said it says moving the figures by hand. So
like a model one.
Yeah, like a model size. He was channeling Jean-Luc Godard throughout the whole movie. And he wanted to reference things like Strangers on a Train, the 1951 Alfred Hitchcock movie, and I don't know. He went into it with I'm making something different.
Yeah.
And I think succeeded in that, if nothing else.
Yep.
So that's what I have to tell you about this movie. We'll talk about it more. Danny, what's the movie actually about?
Okay, so the movie is about 3 tennis players. A female tennis player who is just out of this world good. She could have gone pro immediately at 18, but decided that she is going to college to also get her education before she does go pro. And then 2 male tennis players, one of whom is going to the same school that she is, and the other one who is going pro right then when they are about to start school. And they kind of have a little flirty love thing going on, and she starts dating one of them, the one that is gone pro, and he comes to visit her at college. She gets real pissed at him. She goes and plays her match and fucks the fucking shit out of her knee, which is a horrifying scene. And she ends up marrying the other tennis player. He becomes a pro. He is on the struggle bus in current times, trying to keep active, I suppose. He's trying to get back into the Wimbledon, I suppose, the Open.
The U.S. Open, I think is what they're talking about.
Yeah, U.S. Open and Wimbledon are 2 different things.
Yeah, I know. I don't know tennis. I'm sorry. I know very little of sports in general.
They did talk about both the U.S. Open and Wimbledon.
Yeah.
So
yes, he has done both of them.
Yeah,
but he's trying to compete in the U.S. Open one more time before he has just now decided to be retired.
Mm-hmm.
And he is also suffering from some injuries and everything, and he's having a real hard time. So she actually gets him into a challenge match that's just supposed to help build his confidence. And as it turns out, their ex-friend is playing against him.
Mm-hmm.
Discuss.
So I think it would be super easy because you gave us a whole bunch of information about the directing and directorial choices to start there, because I have thoughts.
Same.
Yeah. I want to address first the statement that he didn't want to create a tennis movie, because it's odd given that the movie is not just a movie that has a sport in it, right? Like there are lots of movies where it's not about the sport just happens to be the catalyst for these people meeting and being around each other. This movie is, in my opinion, only about 2 things. It's about the odd relationship between these 3 characters, and it's tennis.
Yeah.
And they're interwoven. They cannot be they cannot be broken apart because all we know of the characters emotionally, socially, their connections to people outside of the world is how they have interacted with each other while participating in tennis.
Mm-hmm. And it goes all of the way until there is some struggles in Tashi and Art's marriage because he wants to quit tennis.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like their relationships are defined by tennis.
Right.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it seems very odd to say like this isn't a tennis movie. Now I can understand if what the director meant was I just don't want to film this like every other tennis movie.
Yeah.
Which I suppose he succeeded or they succeeded. I don't know their pronouns. I don't know if it was a success though, in my opinion.
Same. There's some things that I really liked. I did like some of the moments where instead of focusing on the tennis players, they were actually focused just on the audience, because they were watching Tashi and watching the audience go back and forth. I kind of appreciated that. I gravely disliked the ball situation.
Yeah, some of the choices felt like they were choices just to be gimmicky.
I don't know that I necessarily agree that they were gimmicky, but it felt like it didn't feel like a seasoned director flexing his chops. It felt like somebody who is directing for the first time, looking for a new way to reinvent the wheel.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know personally that I felt the story was improved upon by these exaggeratedly long volleys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that it was improved upon by being essentially attached to a GoPro on a fucking ball.
That made me sick. I was like, oh no.
Yeah. I liked the volleys because it helped to build tension. But what I didn't like is how often they would like pause in the middle of them.
Yes.
Like the ball would get hit to one player and then the entire movie would slow down to them in that moment. But that moment would last forever. And I'm sure, especially when they're serving, it's supposed to symbolize how time stretches on and on when you're in those moments as the actual tennis player. But as an audience member, it just kind of made me bored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too that it wasn't exaggerated in a way that made sense. Like, it wasn't at the, oh, if I don't get this point, like the world's gonna crumble moments. It was, we're still at the beginning of the match.
Yeah.
And so it just like, it felt excruciatingly long, and not in the way that we as an audience are supposed to feel, like the way the players are feeling, but almost cringy approach to making us really look at every single emotion that the as actors can get across their faces.
Yeah.
I don't know that it landed personally. I don't think it did.
I don't think it did either.
Me neither.
It really got taken out by some of the choices. So there's a moment where they take the camera and go underneath the players. So it's as if the players are playing on like plexiglass and the camera is underneath of them. And that really took me out of it. I was just like, what is this weird choice? Why are we doing this?
Yeah, that one took me out. The ball took me out. There's a couple other ones that I don't remember specifically what they are, but I know when it happened, I was like, oh, why?
Yeah. Well, and I understand getting different cinematic looks at the game. I actually appreciate that because I don't want to watch the same, exactly like she says, to just like plant the camera and watch them volley back and forth. That's not interesting. If I wanted to watch that, I would just go watch a match.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it would be far more dynamic because you're there in the action.
Right.
But I think that a whole probably 10 to 15 minutes could have been cut from the movie of just like uselessly long views.
Well, it comes, I mean, part of it was that some of the camera choices were actually jarring in an uncomfortable way, and not like in a, oh, we're purposely trying to make you uncomfortable way, but like in a I'm getting motion sickness from this.
Yeah, the ball actually made me motion sick.
Yeah. But also it comes back to pacing again. If you're getting towards the last 30 minutes of the movie, most of it shouldn't be pausing on people just slow motion serving a tennis ball. Like, that doesn't get me riled up for the ending.
No.
Well, I think the one that I was like, you got to be kidding me, it was when we got camera views that as if we were the player.
Oh, the first person.
That one. Yeah.
Yeah. And the problem with that is you can't really focus on the other player, right? And it's not directed to the character that you are in the body of, right? So what am I paying attention to other than a ball bouncing it? Like, I am never going to be able to put myself in the shoes of that tennis player, so this is not fun for me. Like, I'm not enjoying this, oh, I get this glance that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. You know what? Like, it just took up more time and slowed the pacing down.
Yeah. I could not help when those scenes came up. I could not help but like stop my mind from going back to, if you ever watched the Doom movie with The Rock. I think it's Doom because it's based off the video game. And at the end of that movie, they switched to first person for a big kind of like action scene. Like, he's going through the hallway and shooting up a bunch of aliens. But that was a nod to the video game that the movie was based off of. Like, it was meant to be something different. And I'm not saying that movie's good by any means. But I shouldn't be watching Challengers and be like, oh, look, I'm back in Doom again.
Right. Well, I mean, Here's the thing. Am I a filmmaker? No.
No. Yeah.
So is there probably nuance to people who are like big film fans to all of the choices that were made? Sure, probably. But where I keep coming back to is sometimes you got to go back to the basics, right? And so what is the subject in your camera's lens? I think that always has to be considered. Why point it there? What are we supposed to get from that? And I feel like the director lost that in trying to overproduce this match and make it a bigger deal than it was.
Yeah.
Without actually playing into the emotion.
Yeah.
If they had taken the 10 minutes that they could have cut from the match and given us more emotional investment into the characters, I think that all of that would have been much more enticing to watch, because I would give a shit who won.
Yeah, we don't really get to know a lot of the character's backstory.
Right?
Yeah, we really don't. We get bits and pieces of it. The other thing that I didn't really enjoy is, so it's constantly going back and forth between present day and back in the day, which is fine, except for that they don't really do it in like a cohesive manner.
No.
Like, it's back in the day, and then it's back in present day, and then all of a sudden it's 2 weeks before this happened back in the day, and it got confusing.
Yeah.
Well, and then another, back to basics kind of question is, whose story is this?
Yeah.
You would think, based on the movie poster and based on the trailers, that it's Tashi's story.
I don't think it's Tashi's
think
I don't
story.
think
Tashi's
so.
story.
I don't think so either. I think it's the ending very specifically seems to be the story of Art and Patrick.
Right. And I don't think it's Art's story though either.
No, because we spend a lot of time with Patrick.
Yeah.
Right. And so if it's Patrick's story, why do we have so much of Art and Tashi when he's not there? Right? Like, it's like, whose perspective are we supposed to be considering in this? And I don't think that decision was made.
Well, and we have almost no information on what happened to Patrick between the time that Tashi and him broke up and she got hurt and she screamed at him to get out, and present day. We know he's struggle bussing.
Well, we don't know if did he try to come back into their lives after that, or did he just like go, all right, and I'm gone forever? That doesn't make sense as a choice.
We know she fucked him in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Other than that,
Yeah.
we really know nothing about what his life has happened, except for that he is having a really hard time making ends meet and not apparently doing very well in tennis.
Yeah, I think part of that also comes back to the timeline, though, too, right? Because we don't have two timelines where we're following the past and following the present day. We have the past as it goes through that meeting and into college and kind of ends when that timeline kind of ends in our story when Tashi and Patrick break up and she hurts herself. But then we get little pieces after that of them in Atlanta, and which is when we find out that Art has proposed to her. But it just like, it feels so disjointed that sometimes it's hard to be like, okay, this scene, where does this fit in the timeline? Oh, that was 3 weeks ago. Okay, you showed me a scene 20 minutes ago. Was that 2 weeks ago or 2 years ago now?
Well, I think the flashbacks thing works best under two circumstances. Either one, we are very narrowly following one person's perspective, and so you can see the train of thought which would lead them to think back to that moment, right? So it's really easy to go, my husband walked in and shouted and scared me, and that brings me back to a moment when the baby was crying, right?
Yeah.
That all makes sense and is easy for the audience to track and can be really emotionally investive.
Yeah.
Investive isn't a word, I don't think.
Invested.
Invested. Yeah. I'm super smart, Anyway, so that's one version where it makes sense. The other version where it makes sense is that it drives the narrative, right? So we're giving you this flashback of the last time the three were all together, so that you understand why them standing together right now is so tension filled. Right? Totally makes sense. It's not anyone's specific perspective, but it gives us the information that we need. That didn't happen with this movie. We didn't have a clear perspective effective, and we didn't have like a clear narrative.
The only time
Yeah.
that like it did kind of push the narrative is because they had the thing that he's like, if you fucked her, serve like me, and then he did it in the final one in present day because he fucked her last night.
Right. But that wasn't even like a flashback, really. That was a callback to an earlier moment in the movie. So it wasn't even like they were doing it on a narrative based way, because if you were, then it would be, we would have Tashi hurting her knee, flash forward to now she's coaching, right? And it would like that, there would be a lead in for each one to make it make sense why we would need that information.
Yeah, I don't understand what the flashbacks were supposed to give us. I get having it where you're telling two different timelines, and the future, the present day, is full of all of this tension and anger and angst, and then you go back in time and you see when it wasn't and how it got to where it is today. But it just didn't give me that big moment when it all comes together at the end.
Yeah, it didn't for me either. I left the theater very confused.
I will say, I think the other thing that hurt it is whoever did the makeup job and like the costuming stuff, I think did a fabulous job with Art and Patrick aging them, because they looked like they were 18 when they were 18, and they looked like they were in their 30s when they were in their 30s. All they did with Tashi is change her hair. So Zendaya, always just looked like Zendaya the whole time.
Well, I will say, when she's a teenager and she's in her like hoodie and shorts, that very much, I was like, yeah, she looks like a teenager right there.
Yeah.
And there were a couple moments like that where like she was wearing like the caramel sweater. I was like, oh yeah, you do look like a woman who is like late 20s, early 30s, right? That's costume wise. They didn't do much in terms of makeup other than like give her bags under her eyes, which is like, come on, that's not aging. That's not what aging looks like.
No, also
No.
she's rich, so like her and Art are very wealthy.
It's
Are
true.
they though?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I think the thing is like, I'm sure they didn't want to put like wrinkles on her face or for whatever reason, but you can also just change the makeup application to age people, because when you're younger, you're either wearing almost no makeup or you're probably overdoing it. But as you get older, your makeup style changes, and they could have done that with her, I think, to show progression as well.
Absolutely.
Well, and to show the difference between someone who's an athlete and who doesn't bother putting makeup on because I'm going to sweat it off anyway,
Yeah.
to somebody who is now the face of her foundation and is representing as a coach and representing as the wife of Art, this professional tennis player.
Right.
You're going to choose a different look, and the hair isn't the only thing that will change and be affected.
Right.
So, yeah.
I was impressed how they aged the boys, though. They did look considerably younger when they were supposed to be teenagers, and the filling out actually is what impressed me with Art's specific transformation.
The only thing I can think with that is they actually filmed it and then he bulked the fuck up to
Yeah,
film
a
the
little
older
bit, yeah.
parts.
Because he really did like fill out, like
Yeah.
his shoulders became very broad all of the sudden, and I don't know if it's just what they put him in when he was a teenager.
Like baggier clothes and stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I was like, because he took his shirt off at the tennis match, and I was like, oh, Art, sir, you got some shoulders.
Yeah.
Which you would as a tennis player. Shoulders and arms for days, son.
I also think the other thing that really bothered me was the very beginning of the movie. We get thrust into this hotel room where Art and Tashi are, and then there's this little girl running around, and you learn very quickly that's their daughter. But they just don't really they didn't introduce us very well. And because the trailers show a lot of it when they're younger, and the love triangle stuff, and her injuring her knee and having to turn to coaching, the beginning of the movie was just like not what I expected. I was so
No, me
confused.
neither.
I think this part I liked if it was done with a little bit more finesse, and I think to completion. The only time we get to know anything about anyone's personal life is when one of those two or two of those three are interacting. So we meet their daughter by happenstance. She's in the background of this mess, right? And the same thing with Tashi's parents. Like, we know they're there and we kind of have a little bit of like context to them, but they're not important to the story that's being told. But they didn't do that with either of the boys' families or friends. So or Tashi's friends, like those people didn't exist. And so you started this really great idea and then didn't see it through.
Well, I guess since you brought up their relationships with other people that are non-existent, we might as well talk about the ones that are existent, and that's the relationship between the three of them.
Yeah, but like in some ways it's not existent, just because we also don't get, I mean, we talked about this a little bit already, but like we don't get to know most of what happens. Like, we jump straight from Patrick wins the match and therefore her number to they've been dating it for a while and she's in college and now she's like a senior about to go professional, to she hurts her knee, to they have not seen each other since Atlanta to present day. And even with that, we get very little of Tashi and Art together.
All we get is we get more tension between Art and Patrick, because Art kind of undermines Patrick when Tashi and him are together, and then is there at the match when she hurts her knee after Patrick and her have this fight breakup situation. And then
Patrick is honestly, in my opinion, the victim here, and like he shouldn't be. But I'm sorry, Art is a complete vampire. He is emotionally draining both of them so that he gets what he wants.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like, I feel like he's that person that just like twitters around and waits for things to happen so that he can strike.
Right? Well, think about it this way. Him and Tashi ending up together makes no sense. Patrick is the one who's first enamored with her. The only reason Art even knows she exists is because Patrick drags Art to one of her games.
Yeah.
And then Patrick ends up getting her number and dating her. And so Art ending up with her doesn't really make sense until you consider the fact that while Tashi is like portrayed as very cold and calculating, Art is a goddamn nemesis to both of their lives.
Well, and you kind of get the storyline that it was always supposed to be Tashi and Patrick together, because they have this fight and it just so happens to correlate with her screwing her knee up, and she gets angry at him, which
she lashes out.
Of course she does.
Of course she does. She's going through a lot of shit.
She lost the most important thing to her, really, which is tennis. Her whole fucking life has changed. And then Art is there to pick up the pieces and asks her to help coach him after she is helping somebody else, and then kisses her, and then we move to them being engaged, and then they're married.
Well, not even just that. Like, you would think if you were really friends with both of them and you see her start screaming, get out, that you would say, no, please, Tashi, hear him out. Like, you guys got in a fight. He made a mistake. Like this. Right. But he's there screaming for Patrick to get out too.
Well, and the thing that is mind blowing is the one little backstory we get from them is that those two went to boarding school together. They've been roommates since they were like 12.
Right.
So Patrick taught him how to jack off.
They're fire and ice, right? They're this great tennis duo until Art goes to college, which happens to be the same college Tashi's at, and Patrick goes off to be a pro and isn't doing so great at that. So yeah, to your point, Wiggs, like, why is Art trying to push them apart other than the fact that he very clearly wants Tashi?
Yeah.
So much so that he's gonna fuck up his best friend of like 6-10 years.
Well, I don't think that I think it's more than he wants Tashi. I think he also wants Patrick. And I think that ultimately seeing the two of them together is driving him absolutely nuts because he's not getting either of them. them. He's on the periphery. Like one of the very first things after Patrick and her has gotten her number and whatever is Art chasing him around saying, did you sleep with her? Did you sleep with her?
Right.
And finally Art just says, just tell me. I'm not going to be upset, but I don't want to be left out.
Yeah.
And I feel like with us having so little information, honestly, it's insane to me how little conversation happens in this movie.
I know.
Yeah.
Given that it's about interpersonal relationships, but given how few lines are even in this fucking movie, a line like that's not unintentional.
Right. And the other thing too is so much of the beginning of this movie is kind of leaning into this idea of, are Patrick and Art hot for each other? I mean, they have like a little bit of a makeout scene the first time Tashi comes to their hotel room. And then, I'm sorry, the most sexually charged scene in the whole fucking movie is when they're eating those churros.
Oh, yeah.
That and like the moment right at the end, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Right. Well, yeah. But like, I am physically affectionate with people sometimes, and I'm not sitting so close to them eating a churro that like we could basically be like sharing it, Lady in the Tramp style.
Yeah, that they were doing that, and I was like, "That you're too close, bud."
Intentionally close, not
Yeah.
like, oh, this is a weird camera choice. No, like this is telling us something. Patrick like stealing it out of Art's mouth to eat it and then feeding it back to him.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is something.
I was like, "That's a very specific food choice as well."
Well, that too.
It feels to me that both of them could potentially have the hots for one another. I think that they're both bi
I agree.
or pan, like open is what I'm
Right.
going to say. Fluid. That's the one we're going to go with. And it feels like Patrick has accepted that if his friend like made the move, he'd be like, all right, let's try it out. Feels like Art isn't ready for that.
Well, no, he's the one who denies it the entire time Tashi asks him about it.
Patrick never does.
Nope.
No.
Patrick never does.
He tells the masturbating story.
Right?
Right.
Because he thinks it's cute.
Because he thinks it's cute. Right? And like you could make the argument that he's doing it to like undermine her wanting to be with Art, but it doesn't read that way.
It doesn't at all.
I think he genuinely thinks it's a cute story. And so I don't know. So I think that that's part of what makes Art to me the bad guy in all of this, is that he knows that Tashi and Patrick have complex feelings about everything.
Yeah.
Right? They probably haven't been dating long enough to have the conversation of I love you or anything like that, right?
Well, and also he's in the pros at this point, so he's traveling a lot.
Right.
They do say that they've been together, or it's been a year since he got her number. And they slept together pretty shortly after that.
But that doesn't mean that they were necessarily
No.
really in a relationship.
Not at all, especially when she's in college and he's traveling everywhere.
Right. And so here's the other part of it is Art specifically targets both of their weak points in the relationship to tear it apart. Like you can't pretend that he didn't. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm jealous and it's coming out of me. Like he specifically targets Tashi, telling her that Patrick doesn't love her and he's probably sleeping with all these women out on tour, right?
Yeah.
And then goes to Patrick and is like harassing him. At one point, even Patrick goes, "You little shit. Like, I see what you're doing. I see you sneaking around and I'd probably do the same, but no, bro." Right? And so honestly, that fight is engineered by Art, because the whole reason they're fighting is because they're having two different conversations and they don't know it. She's
Yeah.
responding to Art telling her that he's probably sleeping with these other women on the road. And so she's trying to talk about tennis to like get at that information without ever actually asking. That's how I read it anyway. And that's, I think, why she won't drop it. It's not because it doesn't feel like their relationship is that they're exclusively have only ever talked about tennis. It feels like this fight is her not dropping tennis. And then, Patrick's coming into the conversation of like, do you only see me essentially as a prop?
Right.
Right. And so they're having, that's where I think the comment of I'm not in your or you're not in my fan club comes from, is that they're both having a completely different conversation that's at odds with each other.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's when she hurts herself, it's supposed to seem like she overdid it because she's angry.
Mm-hmm.
Which she very well might have, but so it's giving an excuse to blame him on top of everything else. Even though it was not his fault. She knows better.
The other thing, though, too, is she had done that move before because we saw it in a previous flashback. So it's a very specific move that honestly looks very dangerous. But then again, I don't know tennis. The whole thing looks like you're about ready to just fall over every time they're running around.
Indeed, yeah. I will say, trigger warning to everybody. Her injury is really upsetting to watch.
It sure is.
They did not pull back from that.
Sure didn't. And poor Liz was next to me, and I know I jumped weird in the theaters because icky.
Yeah. You know, I kind of didn't really pay attention to Art too much because I was like, you're of all three of them, you're the background character. And now you're describing him as this like intentionally like not evil, but just like manipulative background character. And I'm like, yeah, you son of a bitch, you are.
Well, that's one thing I will say that I think was really successful is that the characters themselves were very like distinct and made sense and were very like intriguing characters, which is why I wish that the full scope of the movie was a little bit broader and better. I'm sorry. But Patrick is an interesting character. Tashi is an interesting character. Art is an interesting character. But he's like, the success of him in this movie is that he feels like a background character, which is why you don't really notice until it's too late that he's the bad guy. I think he's the bad guy. I guess that's my bias, but
I know I didn't like him because of the way he kind of manipulated Tashi and Patrick's breakup. I also don't really like Tashi.
I don't either. I will say there was many times where I'm like, I know you're supposed to appear to be the victim here, Art, but it was an instinctual thing where I was like, but I don't like you.
Tashi or Art?
Art.
Yeah.
Well, and I couldn't pinpick why. And then when you started talking about, all the manipulative things he was doing in the background, I was like, yeah, there it is. That's why I didn't like you. Except for one moment. There was one moment where I fell in love with Art just a little bit. And that's she came back into the house after fucking Patrick and realized he wasn't in bed. And she walked over to her daughter's room and he was asleep in bed with their daughter. And I was like, okay, that was cute.
See, I didn't read that as cute. I saw that as another manipulation. He knew she was gone and out, probably talking with Patrick. I think he probably didn't assume that they were sleeping together, but as he makes the comment, can you at least stay with me until I fall asleep? So then when he wakes up, he's got to make her feel guilty for it when she's not there. Sorry to ruin that moment. I didn't read it as cute at all. I was like, you fucking manipulative piece of shit.
I guess the reason that I didn't like Tashi is the film, and from at least what I saw, very much portrayed her as kind of using both Patrick and Art.
Yeah.
Especially Art towards the end, and kind of like using his name and fame in the tennis world, at least, to, I guess, fill the void in her because she can't play tennis anymore.
That's valid. Again, I have a different read on her. She's a child star athlete, and like she understands that the ability to pull her family out of poverty, it rests on her shoulders and her being successful in her sport. I'm sure there's conversations of her going pro, of course, but also things like Olympics.
Yeah.
She knows that that is her purpose now. At 18, she knows, and that's the reason she's going to Stanford, is she knows she won't be able to play this forever, so how else is she going to support her family? I mean, there's a whole bit where Art and Patrick are talking about how long it will be before she has a foundation of her own and how she's going to elevate all of her family to be millionaires. She knows that as well. They just are the ones who say it. And so when she gets injured and Art wants to be her little puppy dog, I think she goes, fine, all right. But again, she doesn't ask Art to be his coach. He asks her.
For sure. Yeah. I think part of the issue here is like, we don't get to know Tashi's background so much. So, we don't really know what family she came from. You know what I mean? They don't really talk about her coming from like a super poor family.
No, I'd say she's probably upper middle class.
Right.
To even like based on the house that they have the party at.
Right.
But still.
I will say that was an Adidas party.
Oh, well, there you go.
Well, that was actually something I'm super confused about, because it was an Adidas party, but they then also started talking about it like it was her house. Like I was literally in the movie theater being like, is this a house Adidas rented for the party?
I think
or are
it's
they having it at her house?
I think it's a house Adidas rented for the party because she's staying at the same hotel as that they are.
Is she?
Uh-huh. Because they asked her if she's staying at that same hotel, and she said yes, and then they gave her the room number.
I also saw it as her house, so you weren't alone.
And I think that's kind of one of the, in my opinion, failures of the movie, is if they're trying to set up certain emotions in us, they need to tell us what they are and not just kind of like lightly hint at it. Because that doesn't intrigue me to come back and watch the movie again and be like, okay, now that I know the ending, what is the beginning? I'm just kind of like, it was confusing. I won't watch it again.
It was confusing, and I won't watch it again.
But what we see of Tashi, kind of getting back to her as a character, yes, she's cold and calculating, but she's also smart as a whip, and she's had the thing that she is exclusively at the like top tier at in her life taken away from her, and she sees this spoiled rich white boy
Yeah.
who has had it handed to him on a silver platter and still can't manage to make it happen. The frustration she must feel looking at the two of them has to be astronomical. She even says, like, do you want me to help make you better? And if you don't, why not? What is wrong with you? Because in her mind, being the best is the only thing to strive for.
Well, her other thing too is she yells at Patrick because he's struggling with all of this and everything, and she's like, what the fuck is your problem? Go back to your parents.
Yeah.
Like, his parents are extremely wealthy. All he would need to do is pretty much show up and he would be, fine. Which I kind of respect that he is trying not to do that to a degree, but at the same time, she's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, you could already have had these issues taken care of.
I think it's kind of her just telling him, at least the way I read it, is I don't have any sympathy for you. Yeah, you're sleeping in your car, but you're doing that because you choose to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. I find her a very sympathetic character because she's in this marriage she probably doesn't really want to be a part of anymore. That's what it feels like to me.
Oh,
like
yeah.
She's exhausted by having a partner who's just like given up and is whiny and annoying, and having to coddle him, having to coddle his like wounded male ego over and over and over again, while also trying to be a good mother to a kid that she's literally taking from hotel to hotel, but she knows she needs to do that in order to maintain everybody's financial security. And here he is going, I don't know, it's hard. I think I want to retire. And she's just like, that's not what she's attracted to. She's attracted to the drive to be successful, and her husband has completely let her down in that regard.
Well, it's really hard when you feel like you have the weight of everybody on your shoulders and you are their safety net, because then it's like you don't have a safety net. So you know that like they can fuck up because you'll fix it, but the second you fuck up, there's nobody to fix it for you. And I definitely get that from this. If she needs art to support her emotionally or be there for her while she's having a hard time, he doesn't seem like the guy who's doing that.
No.
The thing is that when you're married, your spouse is supposed to be your safety net. You're supposed to be able to lean on each other. And clearly they can't. He leans on her, but she can't lean on him.
Yeah. The other thing with that though too is the expectations of each other are probably so different. So if she needed to lean on Art, she would need him to do the things that she does. And in his mind, he doesn't, again, just projecting or thinking, like trying to break this apart with the very little information we got from the movie, he might not see the things that she views important as important. And that doesn't mean that she's right or he's right. It very clearly means that they haven't had a lot of really good, healthy communication in their marriage.
No.
Correct.
I also think it's interesting that the only time there's any comfort exchanged in their marriage, it is Tashi to Art.
Yeah.
Versus, like, I can understand how she would be drawn to Patrick because Patrick will comfort her. Not well, but
Yeah, but he'll at least try.
he'll give it the good old college try, and you got to give him that.
He also seems to have a pretty good read on her for somebody who hasn't really been in her life much
Oh,
in
the
the
moment
last several years.
The moment he told her, she's like, but you hate him. And I was like, oh, he's not wrong, but not pulling any punches there, bud.
I don't think he has any reason to.
Yeah.
No.
Worst case scenario, she tells him to fuck off and get out of her life, and he's already been told to do that once before. So I think he just, every interaction he has with her is steeped in resentment because they could have had something and she chose his spoiled, manipulative friend instead.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should talk about Patrick because we've been really focused on Art and Tashi. When we meet Patrick, he's a fucking mess. He literally has to beg off half of a breakfast sandwich from Dunkin' off of this poor lady who's supposed to be checking him into the tournament.
He's like, he stares at it so intensely.
He can't afford his shitty looking hotel, so he sleeps in his car.
In the parking lot of the club he's supposed to be playing the tournament at.
I'm surprised they didn't kick him out.
I'm surprised they didn't kick him out, not necessarily because his like lie kind of worked, the implication that he's just there super early.
Yeah.
But who parks like that?
Well, also that.
Didn't I in the theater go, and we're gonna park like a douchebag on top of it?
Right? I was like, you could just like park like a normal person. Park in the corner. Like, what are you doing parking right in the middle, all kitty wampus? Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Pull it together, my guy. But that was just a personal grudge.
That's very much if you're gonna sleep in your car, you park at the very back corner of the lot, and then people don't notice it as much.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you just put a neon sign over yourself because you parked like a jackass in the center of the lot.
But then he is a jackass to that poor woman, excuse me, who he goes on a date with just so that he can sleep at her house.
Oh, the scene with him like swiping through Tinder. I know that a lot of guys do that where he's just like saying yes to anybody because like the guys that will like try and match, like if you ever do the like you can pay like $1 or whatever for on special days and it'll show you like who has tried to match with you.
Yeah.
So I've looked at that a couple of times and I'm just like, you want the exact opposite of me. What are you doing swiping? Right? Like what? So there was a part of me that was like, I knew it.
I will say, did you notice when he was swiping Tinder, he did swipe on a guy?
He did. Pause for a second, but definitely was like, yeah.
Yep. I was like, ooh, confirmation.
Yeah. Well, I want to, we've been airing our grievances this whole time, but I want to air a very specific one. The trailers for this movie implied like a real true blue actual love triangle.
Yeah, that is not what was given to us.
I don't get why the Patrick and Art needed to be subtle.
No, not at all.
The trailers were just so upsetting after watching the movie because watching the trailers, what I got was they're all really good at tennis. Tashi busts her knee, and then the two guys vie for her attention to have her coach either of them.
Yeah.
And that ends in this like love triangle that gets really messy, and then there's lots of tennis and blah, blah, blah. That's not really what we got.
No. No. They were really, really selling the romantic aspects in those trailers, and most of that happens in like the first 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Ugh.
After that, I'm like, I don't even want any of them. I maybe want Patrick and Art to be together.
Yeah. If you're going to throw it in our face that much,
then let them have it. Let the people have it.
I'm sure what the story was trying to say is like, because of heteronormativity and the fact that we generally don't allow ourselves to feel like we are exploring sexuality in that way, we are going to have all of this tension, but they're never going to act on it. Or maybe it's like one of those things where like they're friends and they don't want to like ruin their friendship. I don't know. But I tell you what, I had to think way too much to get to that point, and I don't want to think that much when I go to the movies.
I don't mind thinking that much when I go to the movies if that's what's sold to me as what I'm going to see.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to see a romantic entanglement comedy dramedy thing and then that's not what I get. Like, I don't know. I'm just disappointed. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. think of The Good Place every time. I'm not angry. I'm just really disappointed. Even I know that's worse.
So getting back to Patrick. So he's supposed to be portrayed as this like I don't want to say uber charismatic, but certainly more charismatic than our guy who wins the girl. But he only wins her because of the tennis match bet thing. And then when he comes back in like almost every scene, even when he's like sleeping in his car, he's supposed to come across as this like kind of semi-hot shot of a guy. And now that you're talking about like maybe he was supposed to be like the main character, like that feels way more accurate, especially with like his personality.
Yeah, and yet he's not quite the main character.
Yeah,
I feel like he really would have been had Tashi stuck with him and everything, because if she had coached him, he would have become much better at tennis. And I think he would have stuck with things a little better than he did. He doesn't have the discipline to really train the way he should be training to be a professional tennis player. And I feel like had she been with him, she would have kept him at that and kept the discipline for him.
Or he would have resented her for it.
That is also another way it could have gone.
well, I think kind of to your point though, like he and Art, when they were together as a duo, were like the winning pair in tennis. And I think to your point, that kind of just points out that maybe Patrick can't be alone.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
if he has Art, he's good. If he had Tashi actually with him, maybe he would have been good.
Genuinely, I thought at one point watching the trailer, and I think this is where so much of my disappointment came from. I thought at one point that they were going to sort of be a throuple, and
I
that
did too.
one of them would fall off, and that would be the catalyst for the drama, right? And instead, it felt like Tashi. It felt like after she got injured and she lost her boyfriend, and she spent like 3 years before she interacts with Art really again.
Yeah.
That she sort of floundered around and had this moment of realization that no one's going to put her back up on that pedestal again. She's never going to be the premier athlete ever again. And the only people who might still put her there are Art and Patrick. And she's not going to fuck around with Patrick right now. So when she runs into Art, it's a no-brainer. When he asks her to be his coach, she's intrigued. When he tells her he's still in love with her, she's like, well, I haven't done shit to earn this. So if he's in love with me now, that can only get better, right?
Wait till I earn it.
Right. Wait till I prove to you how much better a player I can make you. Only neither of them knows they don't want it, but neither of them wanted that. She didn't want to have to be his fucking mom, and he didn't want to have her controlling his life.
Yeah.
But neither one of them knows how to voice it, and now they're just stuck in this loop. That's what it felt like, seeing the little pieces of the marriage that we got.
That's true. I will make the argument as far as the throuple thing is concerned. We don't know that it doesn't happen, because skipping to the end, the final scene is they're in their last tournament. He has pretty much confessed in front of fucking everybody that I have fucked your wife. I fucked her last night.
Well, only Art would pick up on that.
Right.
Exactly.
I think that's one of the best parts of the movie, honestly, because even Tashi doesn't know, and she's like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
What is going on here?
But so then they're having a very intense, and because Art audibly swore, he then lost a point. And so it was now that they were tied at that point, because he had been ahead because of Patrick's shenanigans with rackets before. And they have a very intense volley. They're going back and forth, and they just keep. I was getting really stressed out because I was like, one of them is gonna blow out their knee just like she did.
I did think that was going to happen as well.
Yeah, I was getting real antsy about it, because I'm like, I can't see it again. It was really gross.
I was sort of like, is that why they're wearing them out? Is that why they're making this run so long? Is to show like these two like wouldn't stop, and that's why they ended up injuring themselves?
Yeah, but so they're having very intense volley back and forth, and they just keep getting closer to the net. And in the last second, is it Art that jumps up?
Yeah.
Art jumps up to hit it, but you realize that he is way too close to the net. He's going to go over top of it, and instead of doing anything to get the ball, Patrick catches him.
Right.
Which I don't know enough about tennis to know if you can do that. Because I know in volleyball you can't do that.
No, but I think it would have also been considered good sportsmanship because he was trying to stop Art from hurting himself.
No. I meant I don't know if Art can hit the ball when he's that far over the net.
No, I don't think he's supposed to either. But so in that moment, Tashi stands up and yells, which is what she used to do when she won.
No. So, well, yes. So that's what she used to do when she would have a good volley. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like the crux of this whole thing is that the reason she even like uses her phone number as an incentive for these two is because she legitimately gets turned on by a good volley. Like the way she talks about
it being a conversation.
Yes, it being a relationship, right? Mm-hmm. That she's having with the other player, and she can't engage in that anymore. So she's just desperate for perfection in tennis because that like energy she can only get there, right? And so she says the exact same thing that like she screams out, "Come on!" right? And so I think like we see her like bunching her hands. There's no reason to focus on that if it's not intentional, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that any really good volley she would do that on. It wasn't necessarily a win. It was like, yes, both players went to the mat and were like, we're gonna fucking own this, and that just gets her hot. I genuinely think that's how it was intended to play out. But that's my read.
Well, I'm still upset that I don't know who won, and I looked it up
too.
I looked it up, and the writer also is like, it doesn't matter who won.
That sounds about right.
And I'm like, but it does.
But it does though. They worked real hard for it.
Well, also Tashi tells Art that she'll leave him if he doesn't win. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's a little unclear if she's saying that just to like motivate him or if she means it. And I think it's a little bit of both.
I think it is a little bit of both.
I think it's a little bit of both.
I think, again, she is chasing that high that she has not had since she's played the sport.
It was an intense volley. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I really thought they were going to get hurt themselves. And I was real antsy about it because that was real gross the first time. And then when they didn't hurt themselves, I'm like, oh, thank God.
I just don't know what that ending is supposed to tell us.
Yeah, I don't either.
Like,
I thought maybe it was pointing out that maybe they all three end up together at that point. But I also wouldn't want that. I don't want them all to be together.
The only thing I think of is that the only like positive outcome I can see is Art and Tashi getting a divorce, because I mean it would take a lot of couples counseling to fix that.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure it could be if they don't love each other. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that maybe Art and Patrick become friends again. Like I don't know. That's the outcome that like I got out of that.
That's what I was kind of hoping for.
I don't know. I don't know what outcome I want, but I think they kind of revert back to when they were young for a minute. I don't know if it lasts.
There's probably way too much baggage for it to last.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, regardless of any other feelings, Art and Tashi have a child together, and that has to be their priority, right? So, how that is impacted, I don't know.
Well, and in their friendship, right, Tashi cheats on Art twice with Patrick. But the thing is like Patrick still not at that point being friends with Art, but having that old friendship means that he also betrayed Art. Mm-hmm. So Art can't, in my opinion, really trust either of them.
No, but again, Art is a victim of his own machinations. Like,
I mean, a little bit. I don't think it's his machinations that led Tashi to cheat on him. Like, she made that choice.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. But I do think that Art didn't do anything to make it less appealing for her to want to cheat on him. Like, in the sense that, like, he knows that's a thing. He knows why they broke up as the fucking cause. Mm-hmm. And he knows what she wants, or at least he should by the time Atlanta happens, and is like somehow absolutely refuses to be or change anything about himself, I should say, to suit her needs. But she's literally like engulfing him in support from all sides.
Well, but we actually don't know that because we don't see him at all after him asking her to coach and like the end series. Like we don't see them together ever. So we have no idea what Art has done or hasn't done in their marriage.
in the reverse side of that, we don't know that Art hasn't stepped out either.
True.
Yeah.
You know, like, so if looking at exclusively what we see somebody who is needy at best and manipulative and problematic at worst.
I guess. I feel like in the scenes that we get of him with Tashi, which we get at the top of the movie when they're married, is he just seems tired and he's only continuing to go in tennis for her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like I get that, you know, when they're in college and stuff, Art is the one who's kind of like the bad guy. But at the end of the movie, I can't really say if he still is. So not at the end of the movie, but at the end of the timeline, with talking about present day, because he also seems like he's just trying to do what she wants him to do.
Yeah. I'm not gonna sit here and say that any of them are particularly good people, but I think Art. Again, this is a little bit like reading context clues, which in this movie is like reading tea leaves.
It really is.
But it sort of feels like a part of him. Because we get that little flash of him seeing Tashi and Patrick talking with each other at Atlanta, and then they're gone. He doesn't like go looking for them afterwards. Like, he doesn't go around the corner. I think there's a little part of him that simultaneously likes to live in denial and is a little bit relieved that, like, the anger that he feels at finding out that they've slept together at the match is a real. It seems like it should be like this really big explosive thing, and it's kind of a fizzle. He just chooses to intentionally let Patrick score on him twice, as like a punishment to her, like, hey, okay, well, watch some shitty tennis then.
Well, because you don't know, is Art so mad about finding out that they slept together that he is just like in his own head and not able to play tennis, or is he punishing himself? Is he punishing Tashi?
Right.
What is
my
what
theory?
Is his motivation?
He was punishing Tashi.
I think he's punishing Tashi personally, because like
he
doesn't even want to be at the challenger.
Yeah. Isn't there also a moment where he like looks to her like right after he finds out? Yeah. You know, thinking about this movie, I'm trying to really figure out what story is supposed to be told here. And I'm totally into watching a more modern movie about modern relationships where things aren't always clear cut. There isn't like a clear cut good guy, bad guy. The ending is muddy because that's real life. But I just can't figure out what the point of it is.
That's my biggest issue, is like, I'm completely fine if like we don't get all the answers and everything. I'm not a like dissect it to death situation, but we didn't get anything, and I didn't understand the entire time what story they were trying to tell me.
Right. It's like you didn't frame up a question that you then gave us the answer to. Kind of thing.
I think this movie, whether intended or not, and that's really hard to tell from even just reading that article about the director's perspective, but I think that this movie is a Rorschach test, and what you see is an identifier for you. So how you perceive this movie tells more about who you are as a person than the story itself.
Yeah, I guess.
I could see that.
I guess.
Which you don't like.
It's not that I don't like it. I'm just trying to think if it was successful in it, because when I left the movie, I was so focused on the directing choices that I didn't like. If we weren't talking about this movie, I wouldn't even be thinking about those relationships. The only thing I would have left with was that was not necessarily always fun to watch, or like I was just so wrapped up in some of like the directorial choices that I wouldn't be thinking about the characters at all.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway was the ball. And dear God, I can't watch her knee do that again.
I do think some of the director's choices were unsuccessful.
Yeah.
As we've talked about
We
quite extensively. And I do think it overshadows, if that was his goal, it overshadows it by miles.
Yeah. Well, if you go online though, and you can't trust reviews of things online,
No.
you can't. But this has like a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes as of us recording. And like, I'm trying to figure out why. Is this one of those movies that's like Oscar bait where just critics love it, but audiences don't?
Maybe.
I mean, I could see how it could be, but it doesn't feel well enough produced. Like, and there's also things in there that just don't serve the story whatsoever. Like the windstorm.
Oh yeah, what was with that windstorm? Why was it like that?
I don't know.
Yeah,
it just
I don't
was.
get it either.
There's this massive extreme windstorm
And I'm not saying weather doesn't happen, but why?
Right, the day before the tournament, and it just goes on through all these scenes, and it's like,
But
to what
why though?
end?
And we spend a lot of time of them establishing it's a really windy fucking day.
Well, and it would make sense if the windstorm was supposed to be there to question if the tournament's even going to happen. Mm-hmm. But we already get scenes where the tournament has happened.
Yeah, there's no,
So, like,
there's no question
There's
on
no
that.
tension. Yeah.
You could also make the argument that the storm is a brewing between the three of them. But I mean, like, if you're going to make that metaphor, why be so loud about it when you've been so quiet about everything else?
Yeah.
You know? I don't know. And then there's things like we really didn't need to see him struggle that much at the hotel, and we didn't need to see that extended conversation that he has with the woman that he's checking in with. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't tell us that much about him as a person. Like, a call from mom would do more, right?
Yeah.
Or even just seeing him try and text Art like, hey, I heard you're here, right? Because all that scene establishes for us is that he is poor, he's struggling, and Art is going to be at the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Right.
it. That's it. And all of those things could be established in 30 seconds.
Well, the other scene that I was really confused about was the sauna scene. Was that happening at the tournament that they're at, or did that happen at Atlanta?
It happened at the tournament that they're at because he talks about Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Does it?
Mm-hmm.
See, again, this is the problem with so many time jumps, is that eventually you're just like, when is this in the timeline?
I think it does also like confirm or reestablish that Patrick is much more comfortable with his sexuality than Art is, because there's a whole moment where Art's like, do you have to be out here with your dick out? And he's like, it's a sauna. And okay, we haven't really talked about bodies or sex and sexy things in this movie, which we probably really should.
Probably.
But like, for some reason, they're like cagey with the main characters' dicks. They're like, no, you can't look at that. We're gonna put a towel. Don't look at their butts either. No, that's not for you. But then, like, in so many shots, there's like in the background, there's just guys with their dicks out.
Yeah.
Why?
That is true. We do see a lot of dicks.
There's a whole like locker room scene where Patrick is sitting there on Tinder and there's just dicks.
There's just dicks.
It is a sea of them. They are flopping free.
One of them is Donald Ducking coming out of the bathroom.
He was Donald Ducking.
I was like, this feels unnecessary. Like, and so for me, like, if you're going to include taboo, if you will, parts of the body in a movie, have it serve a purpose. What purpose was served with that?
I don't honestly know.
Me either.
They just wanted somebody to Winnie the Pooh.
The only thing I can think is it's supposed to be setting up that sauna scene. So, like, it's supposed to show us that in the locker rooms and stuff, guys are just everywhere with their dicks out. Like, it's totally normal to just be like, here's my penis. So that when they go into the sauna and Patrick is naked and Art is covered in a towel, our trained minds are supposed to think like, oh my gosh, Patrick's naked. It's such a big deal. And it's like, it's not. Literally everybody else is naked right over there.
I guess.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think. But the problem is those scenes are so far apart in the movie that you can't tie them together.
Right. Yeah.
Also, it's not weird to be naked in a sauna. It's just not.
Well, not all of us have been in a sauna, Danny.
You've never been in a sauna?
No, where would I be in a sauna at?
Hotels?
The why?
I've never been to the Y, and I don't even go to the pools at hotels. If I'm in a hotel, I don't want to run into other people.
All right. So for me, it stopped being enticing and sexy pretty much after the first time that they meet and are at the hotel. Like after that, it just got boring. It got so boring. The hotel would have been more enticing, except that the whole time I was like, these are teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the other thing. It was really awkward to kind of watch this threesome with some 18-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm past wanting to deal with teenage love.
Yeah.
On the other hand, like, obviously those actors are not 18 years
Right.
old.
Yes.
But yeah, I thought that was going to be one of the more innocent interactions that they had, because they're just young and exploring and figuring things out. And the fact that was the most enticing was really disappointing.
Indeed.
Yeah, well, the only other kind of sex scenes we get are between Tashi and Patrick. Mm-hmm. So there's the scene where they're fooling around in her college dorm room right before they break up. Mm-hmm. And then we don't even really get to see anything of the time that they cheat on Art together in his car. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think when Tashi and Art get together and are making out on top of his car.
Yeah.
I can't be 100% sure because I can't rewind and watch it again, but I'm pretty sure I saw his like hand like aiming towards like getting to business.
Yeah. Sure.
You know what I'm doing? Not what I'm doing. What I'm saying.
Wiggles.
What are you doing?
I don't know. And that's all I can stand by.
Yeah.
But then they're interrupted by the Big Bang from the garbage can, which made me laugh.
Well,
sure.
Then they get back to it, though.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They're very shortly deterred.
I will say the makeout scene from Art and Tashi until it goes sad and sideways is pretty good for a minute, and then it goes sad and sideways. Mm-hmm. Like, he does a moment where he, like, slides up onto the bed and everything. I was like, ooh, hello, slide. And then it went sad and sideways, and I was like, I'm no longer impressed.
Which scene are you talking about?
So they're making out and kind of starting to get down on their bed in the hotel room in present day.
Okay.
And then he ends up laying his head on her lap and, will you hold me until I fall asleep?
Yeah.
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 Like there's a definite slide, and it's getting hot and heavy for just a second, and then womp womp.
Also, and this is a bit of a left turn, but I'm going to do it anyway. So this movie, I think we can collectively agree, is lacking the romance of a rom-com.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And is also really lacking in the comedy, and it's really sad because there's a few moments that like set it up to be like, oh shit, this is going to be funny. There's some really funny like moments early on, and then it's just meh.
Yeah.
Like when Patrick slaps Art's erection.
Oh my God, yes.
That was funny.
Oh God, that was so fucking funny.
And it was literally downhill from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, all I got out of the rest of it was a couple of chuckles. I was very disappointed. And also, why does Tashi not get to have any fun and just the boys get to have fun? That's what I'm talking about.
Because she got up and walked away.
Well, that's one type of fun.
That's true.
You know, did we even get really hardly any scenes with Tashi where she wasn't with one of them?
Not really.
I'm like literally scanning my brain trying to think of one. And I think the only time that we get is them watching her play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really, that's not about her. It's
No.
about them.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, is kind of why I'm more sympathetic to Tashi than anyone else, because like they put her on a pedestal she didn't volunteer to be on, especially at the beginning. And like, do they even know who she is? Do they really know anything about her?
Well, to be fair, we as the audience, all we know about her is that she is very driven in tennis.
Yeah. We know pretty
That's
much the kind of things that you could see on a resume. About
Yeah.
her,
Yeah.
You know, we really don't get to see her perspective of all of this. The closest we get is her chewing out Patrick, but that's really hard to gauge out of context. Is she chewing him out because she still has feelings enough to give a shit to chew him out? Is she chewing him out to motivate him so that he plays better, so that when Art and him face off, if they get to, because at that point I don't think she knows that they're gonna compete, is the goal of it just to push him farther, or is the goal of it literally just to fuck with him? We don't really know. Like, for all the like positioning of her to be the villain, we don't know anything about her motivations.
Yeah.
Which again, I think plays into my theory that Art is the real villain, because we know exactly what his motivations are, and they aren't about loving his wife.
Again, I don't know if that's true, though. Like, I think his motivations were pretty shady when he, like, pushed Patrick to the side to like step in. But also Art and Tashi, from what we can kind of gather, didn't really see each other for a long period of time after her injury, whether that's because of Art or Tashi or both. And then they're together. I mean, from my perspective, we have no idea what he's like in this marriage, other than kind of like
a whiny little bitch.
Not even that. He just looks tired at the end.
Yeah, that's true.
He just, I don't know. I don't read anything from his interactions with her that he is in love with her, even though he says he is in love with her.
Oh, I don't think either of them are
enamored with her at the beginning, and he's dependent on her at the end, but I don't think he's ever been in love with her.
No, I think they're in a loveless marriage.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think she's ever been in love with him either, though.
Right. But we also don't see her making claims to that either.
Like,
That's true. He says, I love you. And she goes, I know.
I don't know. Like, again, we're trying to find context where there is none.
Yeah.
There is none to be had.
And I'm sure that's part of the point, right? Who is the villain? Who did who wrong? Blah, blah, blah. But
really, I think all three of them should step away from each other. And
oh, for sure. That would be the
I don't
healthy
think
choice.
any of them is the good guy. I think it's weird that Tashi is framed as the bad guy. That's what I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
Especially because we get the least amount of information about her as a person.
Especially in the beginning of the movie, like, or at least in the beginning of the timeline, because pretty much all of our information about her comes through the lens of Patrick and Art. And then at the end of the timeline, so really the beginning of the movie, we just kind of see her struggling in her marriage with Art and trying to like manage him and manage his career.
The other thing to think about is we get with both Patrick and Art moments where they are, by at least their own perception, aren't being watched. Right? So you get a better sense of who a person is in those moments when they're not performing. We never get to see that with Tashi. Even if she is alone, she's in a public place, like waiting in the hotel lobby or is in her hotel room looking for Art. So we don't know who she is.
No.
yeah.
And you know, her kind of being portrayed as the home wrecker, right? Which she specifically says she doesn't want to be. The boys put her in that position in the beginning of the storyline. Of course, she still makes the choice to cheat on Art with Patrick. But like when they first get to know each other, those two are the ones who are putting her in that position. Like she's not choosing both of them. They're just always together and both trying to get her attention.
Right. Well, and I think it's important to acknowledge that at no point did she pursue either of them.
No.
They could have just left her at peace, right?
The only thing that she did is go to their hotel room after the big Adidas party when they're all 18, which, I mean, you're all 18. You've got so many fucking hormones. You're just screwing around. Like,
You're like, ooh, you got beer? Cool.
Right. Also, you have beer.
Well, and I think, again, she's, even in that moment, she's chasing a high with trying to manipulate these two boys who refuse to acknowledge that, like, she multiple times is like, there's something here more than just friendship. And finally manipulates them into, like,
making out with each other.
And then she leaves them. It's like, here, you guys made out for a little bit. You figure out what you want to do with that. I'm going to go.
And what did they do with it? Patrick slaps Art's erection.
Acts like a bunch of dumbass teenagers.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like, well, she's gone. Do you want to? You know what I mean?
Sexy fun times.
You know, I also kind of struggle with who is the narrator and are they reliable?
Well, we would have to know who the narrator is first.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm so confused. I'm so frustrated. And maybe that's the desired emotion.
Also, did either of you realize that in that makeout scene with all three of them, the beds are pushed together?
Yes, I did notice that. I was very confused as well by that.
Yeah.
I at first thought that they just got a room with a king bed together, which I was like, can you really afford better than that?
Right.
Like,
But then you realize that there's two different headboards, so I'm like, the beds are pushed together.
yeah.
Interesting.
Right. Anyway, that seems as good a time as any to walk away from the conversation. So,
Yes, it does.
ratings time.
Yup.
Spice.
I don't know. I mean, like, movies are always hard to gauge because they're so drastically different than books, right? It's an entirely different scale. Like a
Like
2?
I was gonna say like a 1.5. Nothing ever really gets like truly hot and heavy per se.
Well, again, you got to talk quality and quantity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think because I don't want to think anymore, I'm going to make it easy on myself and I'm going to call it an even 2.
Okay. Romance?
0. I didn't like any of their relationships. I didn't want them to be together except for Patrick and Art. I wanted them to be together.
That's kind of the problem, right? Is like we are specifically being told there is no romance between Tashi and Art.
Right. So that leaves Tashi and Patrick. And if they're the basis for the romance rating, it's not high.
No. I feel like I want to give it more than a 0, but it's just like maybe like a 1. You could maybe give it that.
I'll agree a 1.
Okay.
There's 1 based on potential. There's potential romance, but we don't really ever get to see it.
So what's your overall rating?
I didn't love this movie. It confused me and bored me a lot. I'm going to give it like a 1.5.
I am going to give it a 3
Okay.
because I think that if a movie can make me think this long about it, that means it's achieved something. And regardless of whether or not we were recording this podcast episode, I would still be thinking about this movie. So I'm going to give it a 3, but not the good kind of 3.
You see, the thing is if we weren't talking about it, I wouldn't be thinking about it. I mean, I would have just kind of been like, I don't get it, and walked away. Mm-hmm. So I think I'll give it a 2. And I honestly believe a large part of that comes from the fact that we were sold a different movie.
Yes.
Yeah, we absolutely were. I was like, ooh, this is going to be kinky and fun and a little different. And then nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I almost wanted to put a PSA at the beginning of the movie, or at the beginning of the episode that was just like, this is not the movie the trailers are purporting it to be.
No.
Because it's not. Anyway, I've beaten that horse to death.
So what do you want your recommendations to be then?
So I'm going to recommend a good sports romance movie, Love and Basketball. It's about a guy and a girl who know each other in high school and through college and end up dating, and both of them are really high quality basketball athletes, and both are pursuing the dream of being a professional basketball player. And
Sure.
There's a lot of confusing emotions that get mixed up in that when life hits hard, and it's difficult in general to take a relationship from high school up. Right. And so it's just a really good movie. That's it.
I have a few recommendations. I'll start off by recommending Wimbledon, the movie with Kristen Dunst and Paul Bettany. If you want a rom-com version of this story about tennis, that's actually a true rom-com, like go with that, where Kristen Dunst is like this young upcoming tennis player and Paul Bettany is like kind of a little washed up, a little bit older. It's pretty enjoyable. And then kind of for vibes, but also like I feel like some of the things they were trying to do with the Challengers movie was done successfully with the Queen's Gambit TV show.
Good recommendation.
Yeah.
If you don't know what that is, it's about chess. But also has a lot of emotions about like women in chess, especially is it set in the 70s? I can't remember.
I
Sure.
believe so, yeah.
And then she has some really complicated relationships with her mother and then like men in her life and stuff. And then if you do want something that is a recommendation based on the trailer, like if you watched the trailer and you're like, but I wanted that, you should read Pucking Around by Emily Rath, which is a hockey why choose romance about a sports doctor. What are they called? The physician that's on the team or whatever. And the fact that she falls in love with like one of the players and also the equipment manager. And there's like a love triangle, but then they also kind of like have something going on between them. So read that book if you want the trailer and a much more adult and very spicy version of it.
Oh.
Well, I'm going to go with Wiggles and also do what's a good sports movie. I'm going to do Cutting Edge. It's an older movie, but she's a figure skater and she keeps running off her partners because she's kind of a dictator when it comes to everything. And so her coach brings in a hockey player to be her figure skating partner. So he has to learn how to figure skate and how they make each other better in their sport in this way. And there is a little bit of a love triangle because technically she is engaged to another guy as well. So
there you go.
There you have it.
All right, folks. If you liked this episode, please find us out there at the socials at Wrong Dust Jackets. We would love to hear from you, so drop a comment wherever app you are in. And if you want to go check out our website at wrongdustjackets.com, you'll find all sorts of other episodes that we're going to be doing, as well as blog posts about books that we have read but are not going to be doing episodes about, or maybe in the future might, who knows. Otherwise, please give us 5 stars on whatever podcast listening app you're on. It helps us a lot, and I'd greatly appreciate it. That's all I got. Bye, y'all.
bye-bye.
Goodbye.